Today, I shall discuss Sonnet 29, or When in Disgrace with Fortune and Men's Eyes. It is one of the 154 sonnets written by William Shakespeare and forms a part of the Fair Youth sequence. I have already talked about the Fair Youth sequence, which comprises of sonnets from 1 to 126 in my previous video. This is the poem Sonnet 29. Introduction. Sonnet 29 shows the poet in his most insecure and despairing mood. He feels very unlucky and expresses his grief at his status as an outcast. He says that he is out of favor with fortune and finds people hostile to him. He reproaches heaven for his bad luck and curses his fate. His deplorable condition makes him feel jealous of those who are more fortunate and good-looking. However, Shakespeare cheers up when he remembers his friend. The fond remembrance of his friend overcomes his mood of depression caused by his outcast state, which was due to his lack of achievements or loss of friends. The first quatrain. In the first quatrain, the mood of depression is very marked. It is highly charged with emotions. The speaker in the first line assumes himself to be in disgrace with fortune, which means that he has been having bad luck. He also finds himself in disgrace with men's eyes. It implies that the general public looks on him unfavorably or with scorn. In line 2, he bemoans his outcast state. Here, state refers to a state of being, and in this case, he is cast out from society and is all alone. The poet's outcast state could possibly be a hint to his lack of work as an actor during the closure of the theatres in 1592, during an outbreak of plague in London. It could also be a reference to the scathing attack on Shakespeare at the hands of Robert Greene, the dramatist. The next lines of the quatrain register these effects on the speaker's life. He is alone. He is full of self-pity and weeps over his condition. He then prays to heaven for relief. God is personified as heaven, and in this case he is deaf, thus making the poet's cries bootless or useless. The prayers fail to improve his lot, and so he looks at himself and curses the circumstances that brought him to this point. The idea of cursing one's fate also refers to Job of the Old Testament in the Bible, who cursed himself after falling out of God's favor. The second quatrain. In the first quatrain, we have already seen how the poet's outcast state of being has affected his thoughts and feelings. This exploration of his mental state continues in the second quatrain. In this quatrain, the speaker consistently compares himself with others. Thus, in lines 5 to 10, he sees almost everyone as having something that he lacks and envies what others have. He wishes to be like one more rich in hope, perhaps meaning literally wealthy and hopeful. He wants to be like someone who is more physically beautiful and who has many friends. Thus the words featured like him refer to someone who is handsome with beautiful features, and with friends possessed mean one who is popular unlike the poet himself. In line 7, he envies the artistic talent of one man and the opportunities knocking at the door of someone else. He has lost the capacity to take pleasure in the things he loves best. The third quatrain undergoes a major shift, and it is typical of Shakespeare to turn around the train of thought. A transition is hinted at by the word yet in line 9. This interjection indicates that the speaker will somehow come out of the misery that he has been speaking about in the first two quatrains of the poem. In line 10, the poet says, "Haply I think on thee." it must be noted that everything in the poem has been building to this moment where the speaker thinks on thee, means thinks about his friend and everything that follows from it. In the middle of his gloom, the poet remembers his friend, who is perhaps the Earl of Southampton, and his state, which is his emotional being, begins to sing. And I quote, like to the lark at break of day arising, from sullen earth sings hymns at heaven's gate, unquote. The simile of a lark is developed in lines 10 to 12. In these lines, the speaker describes the effect that the thought of his friend has on his state. The lark rises from the sullen earth at break of day. The poet's gloom is like the darkness of night, and the lark that symbolizes joy and light is compared to the dawning of a thought of his friend. He likens the feeling that he experiences at the thought of his friend to a lark rising in song. As the lark sings hymns at heaven's gate, so the poet's soul is energized with the thought of the fair Lord that seems to sing with renewed hope. In the concluding couplet of Sonnet 29, the poet declares that the very thought of his fair Lord makes him feel rich and wealthier than a king. That is, his friend's memory is enough to convince him that he is better off than royalty. Here, state is a pun. It carries the meaning of emotional well-being that suggests that the lovely thoughts of the fair Lord make the speaker so happy that all the wealth of the king would be nothing in comparison to it. But it also refers to a nation or a kingdom. The structure of Sonnet 29. Mark that the whole poem is one long sentence. It starts in line 1 with the dependent clause of a conditional sentence. Sonnet 29 is a 14-line Shakespearean sonnet, but it is a little different. The first 8 lines are a cascade of repetitive complaints. In Shakespeare's sonnets, the volta or turn usually comes at line 13, but in Sonnet 29, its volta comes in line 9. I quote, "Yet in these thoughts, myself almost despising," unquote. Here we see the sentence entering its main clause. The rhyme scheme ABAB, CD, EB, FF is slightly different from the traditional AB, CD, EF, GG Shakespearean rhyme scheme. Literary devices used in Sonnet 29. Figures of speech are often central to Shakespeare's sonnets. And Sonnet 29 is replete with literary devices. The first literary device that you can see on the slide is alliteration. Look at line 2. All alone is an example of alliteration. Then in line 9, these thoughts. Line 10, think on thee and then. Line 11, like to the lark. Line 12, sullen earth sings hymns at heavens. These are the examples of alliteration. The next, apostrophe. Like many of Shakespeare's sonnets, Sonnet 29 speaks to someone. The poem is a love poem and its speaker addresses the man he loves directly, referring to him as thee and thy. Hyperbole, which means exaggeration, that is, a language that describes something as better or worse than it really is. The speaker in Sonnet 29 uses hyperbole throughout the poem. In the opening section, the poet lists his anxieties and sorrow, and in the final 6 lines, he describes how cheerful the thought of his friend makes him feel. All these feelings are exaggerated by the poet. Personification, line 1. In disgrace with fortune and men's eyes, fortune has been personified. It means he is out of favor with luck, And line 3, heaven is deaf heaven. Heaven has been personified in this phrase. It turns a deaf ear to all the poet's complaints. Simile. Simile can be observed in lines 11 and 12. Example, like to the lark at break of day arising, from sullen earth sings hymns at heaven's gate. In lines 11 and 12, the speaker of Sonnet 29 compares his happy state to a lark at the break of day arising from sullen earth, who sings hymns at heaven's gate. The simile is in many ways traditional. Poets have often compared themselves to birds like larks and nightingales. Synecdoche, a figure of speech in which a part is made to represent the whole or vice versa. In line 1, the speaker notes that he is in disgrace with men's eyes. Eyes don't judge, people do. That means that if he is receiving scornful looks, it's because people have turned against him and judged him. So men's eyes thus stand for men and the whole of their judgment. The next device used is symbol. In poetry, heaven is often both a literal and a symbolic place. In this sonnet, heaven symbolizes God. The lark serves as symbol for beauty and musicality. The lark is also a symbol of prayer, since its song seems to rise up to the heaven. The next literary device used is imagery. Imagery is used to make readers perceive things involving their five senses. For example, I all alone beweep my outcast state, and that then I scorn to change my state with kings. The next literary device is enjambment. It is another important technique commonly used in poetry. It is the continuation of a sentence without a pause beyond the end of a line, couplet, or stanza. It occurs when a line is cut off before its natural stopping point. For example, the transition between the following lines, I quote, like to the lark at break of day arising, from sullen earth sings hymns at heaven's gate, from thy sweet love remembered such wealth brings. These lines describe the speaker's shift in mental state as he thinks about his friend. This enjambment suggests a newfound happiness at the mere thought of his friend. Caesura. Sonnet 29 contains two caesuras in lines 6 and 10. In line 10, the caesura neatly divides the line into two rhetorical halves. The line starts with an action. The speaker thinks about his lover. The line ends with the consequences of that action. His state is somehow transformed by his thought. The caesura breaks up the cause and the effect. There are two observable themes in this sonnet. The first is self-pity, despair, isolation, and jealousy. The theme of isolation, envy, and despair pervades the first few quatrains of the sonnet. In the first 8 lines, the speaker makes a series of complaints and compares his anxieties and misfortunes to those who are more prosperous, successful, and beautiful. The speaker thus suggests that his sense of self-worth depends on others. The poem begins with the poet enumerating a series of setbacks he has suffered at that point of time in his life. He describes himself as disgraced and an outcast and implies that he is hopeless, unlucky, and scorned by others, that he lacks political influence, and that he no longer takes pleasure in the things he once enjoyed. Interestingly, each of his complaints places the speaker in relation to the others around him. He compares his own beauty, wealth, and status to those who are more fortunate. This self-pity, that in turn takes the form of jealousy, only serves to distance him from the rest of the society. Indeed, He bemoans how he all alone cries about his outcast state and resents those with friends possessed. The next theme is that of love, friendship, and wealth. This sonnet is not only about disappointment, isolation, and despair, but also about the way that love and friendship comforts, soothes, and mends the injuries that one endures in life. After the bitter opening of first 8 lines, the speaker reflects on the love and friendship he shares with his friend. Love, he argues, offers solace and compensates for all his losses, be it insults, disappointments, and misfortunes in life. With this, I end the analysis of Sonnet 29. Thank you and have a nice day.